In this video, we're going to talk about the different types of respiratory systems in different animals. There are several different ways that animals can basically have an exchange of respiratory gases. So some of the simplest animals, such as the cnidarians, which remember these are the jellies, and flatworms, which is what we can see in this picture here. These organisms tend to have a very thin body, and the cells get oxygen directly from the environment. And that happens through diffusion, and more specifically, it's simple diffusion. So essentially what happens is you have the external environment, and oxygen diffuses into the cells. The cells use that oxygen to make ATP through cellular respiration, and then carbon dioxide diffuses back out. Now, one thing that is a requirement is that these organisms must be small and they must be very thin. So flatworms, they're not necessarily small this way, but they are very flat. So they're very thin so that the oxygen and carbon dioxide can diffuse in and out of the tissues relatively easily and be able to get to all the tissues or all the cells inside the body. Some animals have the ability to exchange gases across their skin. And this is different from diffusion because diffusion is where gases are going directly from the environment into the cells and back out. With animals like earthworms and amphibians, what they have, so let's pretend like this is an earthworm here. And so this is the skin. And just underneath the skin, there are capillaries. All right, and so these capillaries are blood vessels. And so as that oxygen is diffusing into or across the skin, it's not going to all the body cells like we see up here with simple diffusion. Here it's actually going into the blood and then getting distributed around the body. So that's the big difference between these first two. In the first one, the respiratory gases are directly being exchanged with cells in the body and the external environment. In the second one, you still have exchange or simple diffusion of those respiratory gases across the skin, but in this case, the oxygen is going into the blood, being carried around the inside of the body, and then carbon dioxide is being delivered or diffusing out through the skin, but being delivered to the superficial blood vessels just underneath the skin to be released into the environment. Amphibians are another example of animals that are able to do gas exchange across their skin. One requirement of this type of respiration, though, is that the skin must be moist. So these organisms have to live either in aquatic environments or in really wet terrestrial environments. And so that's one reason. For example, earthworms are often, found in soil where there's a lot of water, but if they end up on concrete, they can't live on concrete for very long. So that's why you see worms that get kind of dried out and dead on sidewalks and patios, and that's because they are no longer able to respirate because their skin has dried out. Animals like fish have gills, which you can see in this picture here. And this picture doesn't show it super well, but these gills are actually highly branched and folded. So if you were to look at these maybe kind of under a dissecting microscope, you would be able to see these kind of folds associated with the gills. And the reason why they are branched and folded like this is to increase surface area, because the more surface area, the more area there is for gas exchange. You can also see that they are red. That's because there's an extensive blood supply that is running through these gills. And so dissolved oxygen in the blood is able to basically diffuse across these gills into the bloodstream, where it then gets carried to other parts of the body. Carbon dioxide, which is produced as a byproduct of cellular respiration, then gets delivered back to the gills where that carbon dioxide gets dropped off or diffuses out of the blood back into the water. Other organisms, such as insects, have tracheal systems. And this is kind of interesting because with insects, the respiratory gases are not transported in the blood. So, in most other organisms, you kind of have this connection between the respiratory and circulatory systems because the respiratory system delivers oxygen to the blood transports that oxygen around the body, and then picks up waste products like carbon dioxide, which it then delivers back to the respiratory system to be released out of the body. But that's not the case with insects. So instead, they have these small tubes called trachea that carry oxygen around the body. And you can see it in the picture here. The tracheal system is this kind of blue tube-like system here. They have openings in their exoskeleton called spiracles. And those spiracles are where the gases enter and leave the body. And they connect to the tracheal system where those gases then get distributed around the body. A lot of insecticides, like if you get a spray to kill wasps or spiders or something like that, a lot of those insecticides actually work to block the spiracles. And so you essentially are cutting off gas exchange so that the organism can't survive. And then the majority of this unit, we are going to be focusing on lungs, which are found in amphibians. So amphibians have lungs, but they also can do gas exchange across their skin. Reptiles, birds, and mammals also have lungs.